in the regular season, a playoff push for your Denver Broncos. But Andrew Mason, are the Broncos already in a playoff push?
I'd say, yeah, this is playoff week number 1. I mean, if you go by the various websites that are devoted to playoff odds and that sort of thing, you're talking about maybe a 50 percentage point swing in terms of this game and what it means for the Broncos playoff chances. Because of course, if you lose to the Indianapolis Colts, they take the tiebreaker on you. They're sitting, they still have a little bit of ground to make up because it's, there's one more game, but of course the Broncos have to go to Los Angeles right after that. And so it does already feel that way. And by the way, Cecil, I was a little thrown off there. The music cut off too soon. Maybe we need to let it go a little.
Let it breathe a little bit?
Let it breathe a little bit. We're experimenting because you've probably noticed no countdown today.
Right. We're just jumping right into this topic because is it already playoff time? The playoff push, of course, is here. And Mace, I don't necessarily see it as like these are must-win games. I think that's overblown on talk shows of like it's a must-win. But when you're facing the Colts, the Chargers, and the Bengals, those would be some pretty good wins if you can get them. So again, I'm not going to say must win, but starting with Indianapolis, brother, the importance level is almost that of a playoff importance. These are very, very good tests for the Broncos now.
And this is the highest leverage game coming up next week against the Colts. I mean, basically, you get this done and you'll be sitting at 9-5, and the Colts will be 3 games back, and you'll have the tiebreaker on them. And then, as I've pointed out repeatedly on social media, if the Broncos win 2 games and then Miami loses 1, it's academic. The Broncos are in the postseason. You almost got that 1 loss from Miami yesterday, but the Jets were going to jet. Davante Adams goes out of bounds. When Adams went out of bounds there on that last drive, did you have the same reaction I did, which was to say, okay, Miami's going to win this game now. Yeah. They're going to get the game-tying field goal here, and they're going to win it in overtime because that's just how things work for the Jets.
It's like Sean McDermott not knowing how to use his timeouts. That was a game where Miami there trying to stay in things. Cincinnati, I believe, Mason, we can look at Cincinnati's future opponents. Like they're, of course, playing tonight. We're before the Simpsons game, which is going to be cool. Like I imagine they'll beat the Cowboys, and then they've got a few more winnable games coming up. So like if they go on a hot streak and Denver falters a little bit, that Cincinnati game will mean something as well. So yes, playoffs, and then the Chiefs resting their starters.
Yeah, Cincinnati has Tennessee and Cleveland after this. So if they get done against Dallas, and I've talked a little bit about teams that are regression candidates or ascension candidates. Cincinnati, in terms of their record relative to the Pythagorean record, which is based off of point differential, Cincinnati is an ascension candidate. Now, whether that happens this year or next year, that's to be determined. I mean, we'll probably get an idea on that tonight. If Cincinnati loses this game, this is loss number 9, and for all practical purposes, they are going to be out of the mix. But if they win this one and they get the next 2, then they're 7-8. If the Broncos take a loss to either Indianapolis or the Los Angeles Chargers, then it gets interesting. And certainly if they lose both to Indianapolis and the Chargers, and they're going in with an 8-7 record, and Cincinnati is 7-8, then effectively that game in Cincinnati becomes an elimination game. Certainly, I know there's a lot of confidence in Broncos country, and the fact that they, in their last 11 games are 8-3 certainly leads to understandably high hopes here. But it's not hard to foresee a scenario where even one loss then puts a lot of importance on that Bengal game, because the Broncos, they could be 9-6, the Bengals 7-8. Bengals with a win would make up one game, and the Broncos would go into Week 18 with a must-win game against the Chiefs, and that's where you hope the Chiefs would have things wrapped up and not have anything resting on that game. So, the Broncos are in very good shape, but they haven't quite finished navigating through the minefield just yet when it comes to being a playoff team.
Right. And the nice thing about that locker room, Mace, and really the culture that Sean Payton has established, they're not resting on their laurels. They don't think they've made it. You know what I mean? Like, hey, we got 8 wins, guys. We made it. We're better than people thought. We made it. And you hear that from several, comments and just the way players talk. The Jaleel McLaughlin comment from today, we got to set this one up because I think it ties into what we're talking about here. In a team that's not getting ahead of their skis, whatever analogy you want me to use, like, just listen to Jaleel Mason. And I don't think this team has a mindset of like, we totally made it. In fact, it might be the opposite of that.
I'd say so too. Let's play that comment.
Man, that's what you work for. This is games like this, and games that matter is what you work for. So, ever since you've grown up, you watch, different games on TV, and you see how hard those guys are out there playing, and it's like, that's always what you want to be in. You want to be in the best games. You want to play against the best, and stuff like that. So I just feel like this team is ready. This team is ready. So, and that'll be on display for sure.
I like that. That's what you work for, Mason. Certainly we know with Jaleel McLaughlin, that workday starts about 5 a.m.
It sounded like he was working over the bye.
Yeah.
As well. And it was, we heard from Jaleel McLaughlin and Zach Allen today. Zach Allen's like, I didn't leave town, didn't want to get on a plane and deal with all that. Jaleel McLaughlin's like, I'm still watching film, still getting ready, even in the bye week. It's you got the distinct sense that this team really they got a little separation over the bye, but not much. That their focus is still very much keyed on the task at hand, and that's where having a game that flowed the way last Monday's did probably serves as more help than hindrance, because it was exciting. There were some big plays, but oh my goodness, there was a lot that went wrong in that game against a team that is now sitting at 3-10 after losing in Pittsburgh on Sunday. So you struggled against a team that objectively, while they caused some problems, isn't very good. It's a reminder that, okay, you're not there just yet, and any game can be the banana peel. And especially when that game coming up this Sunday is against a team that also is still in the playoff race, even though they trail you by a couple of games here. You can't let them back up. Can't let them back in, because if you do lose to the Colts and you follow that with a loss to the Chargers, and the Colts have a pretty easy run to the end of the season, you are in some trouble.
Yeah.
And it's out of if you lose these next two, it's out of here. And the Colts follow that up with a win in week 16. It's out of your hands at that point. So,
and I think as we know, Sean Payton, like, there's one thing that he loves, it's control. So control what you can control, which is your effort and your performance. As the week goes on, I can't wait to dive into this Colts matchup, which is much tougher than I believe some people are thinking. The Broncos are on a high. The Broncos are on a roll. But damn it, you can't fall asleep at the wheel. Not with these teams coming up. Look at what the Chargers were able to do without Ladd McConkey. Without J.K. Dobbins, you know what I mean? And I know they lost that game to Kansas City because Kansas City is going to get some stuff there at the end. Not refs breaks, but they just made the plays they needed to in critical downs to beat the Chargers. But that Chargers team is good. The Colts team is good. Bengals can be dangerous. Like, this isn't these last 4 games, after the bye, we'll see what changes they make. But These 4 games are a test.
And oh, by the way, you don't want to be in a situation where you're hoping the Colts lose, because after playing the Broncos this coming week, it's Tennessee at the Giants and then Jacksonville. The Tennessee-Jacksonville games are at home. So just do the quick math on that. Those are teams that are a combined 8-31.
Whew.
I mean, they have, after this week, they have the easiest 3-game run in the league, which is another reason why you don't want to give them 1 game here, because then there's a pretty decent chance they close that gap either with the result in Los Angeles or the result in Cincinnati, unless the Broncos could win both of those road games. And if they don't win this one against Indianapolis, I don't like the Broncos' chances of going to LA and Cincinnati and getting a 2-game sweep. I mean, that's where then you're hoping the Bengals stumble along the way to where they're at least a little bit checked out heading into that Week 17 game, and you can take advantage of that. So it's been a time to feel good, feel excited, feel optimistic, to savor a little bit in what the Broncos have done to this point over the last 24 games. They're the most improved team in the league from the previous 24. That's something to celebrate. Bo Nix's progress from his first 4 starts to his last 9. You can read all about that at denversports.com. That's something to celebrate. But today, the Broncos got back to work. Celebration's over. Time to get your head screwed on straight. And all of us, including the media, it's, the laurels are done. Now it's a full week of prep for, like you said, a very interesting Colts team, and interesting for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is Anthony Richardson. While the consistency decidedly is not there for him, the ability to make plays in high leverage situations is coming into focus for this young man.
Yeah, and things you have to prove after that Browns game, like, okay, Vance Joseph, what are you changing after the bye? What are you changing without Riley Moss still? What changes are there? Perhaps more Chris Abrams drain. I believe Sean Payton did talk about that today in his Zoom press conference, Mace. But like,
I asked him. I asked him about.
Oh, well,
that.
What did he say? What did he say?
Liked what he's done. Praised his intelligence as well. I actually have the comment right here. Said smart. He's got a savviness to him. I think he's getting stronger physically, and I thought he handled his role Monday night going in there and playing. Thought he had a pretty good game in the kicking game. So overall, I was pleased. That's what Sean Payton said. The savviness and smart, I think, are the 2 key words there that Sean Payton offered in the course of that response. And actually, if we've learned anything about this team this year, I would say it's trust the kids and what they're doing. At the same time, they did work out a cornerback today. So. Yeah. So they're doing what good teams do. They always have their radar up just to see what's out there and how that can help them going forward. But this game, man, in these next few games, you want to enter the playoffs not backing in. And there's a conversation about that, and when they get there, we'll have a further conversation, Mace. But if you and I watched a lot of football, you can't really remember a team backing in and having a ton of success. I believe it was the Beastquake. Didn't they back in? Weren't they like 7 wins in Seattle that year? They were 7 wins, but they did earn their way in Week 17 by beating the Rams in one of those Sunday night football winner goes on, loser goes home games that they love to have on Sunday night to close the regular season. So I think when you're talking about a team that backed its way in, to me, a great example of that is the 2011 Broncos. Losing their last 3 when the bloom fell off the Tim Tebow rose, still managing to squeak in when the Raiders lost at home to the Chargers at the same time as the Broncos fell to Kansas City in Week 17. And then the Broncos put it back together and won in the wild card round before losing in the divisional round. So it's interesting to sort of think about that. But deep runs for a team that backed in, that's that's probably a different answer. I'd have to dive into that and actually see, but yeah, probably different. I mean, I'm thinking Green Bay didn't even back in 2010 when they were the last seed in the NFC playoffs and went all the way to win the only Super Bowl they won while Aaron Rodgers was the quarterback.
I believe the Steelers in Super Bowl 40 were the final seed as well. So we've seen wild card teams, but I'm talking about getting cold in the month of December. You want to heat up, and that's why this bye, although I don't like late buys, it might have timed up perfectly if you can get back and get hot. And we always talk about Baltimore in 2012, like they fire Cam Cameron and they get hot.
Well, Baltimore lost 4 of its last 5 to close the season, but they did get a win right, if not right after, not long after they jettisoned Cam Cameron for Jim Caldwell. And they played the Giants, who themselves were in the playoff mix, although they fell short at 9-7. And they played the Giants and they throttled them pretty well in the penultimate game of that regular season. So I think when we say backed in, it's like losing your last 2 or 3. And losing your last 2 or 3 when you have something to play for. So, like, for example, I wouldn't call the 2009 Saints a team that backed in, even though they went from 13-0 to 13-3, because then by week 17, they were intentionally sitting players as in that game against Carolina. And Sean Payton even alluded to that today, how they got criticized for that when they did that. Do you remember the quarterback they started that day when Drew Brees was down?
Ooh. Oh, I have a guess, but I think I might be wildly wrong.
Okay.
Just tell me who it is. I don't even want to say my guess because it might be way off.
Mark Brunell.
I was going to say Mark Brunell. Okay, thank God.
You were? Really?
I was, yeah. But I was like, I was trying to do the math of like, when was Brunell around? So, yeah, I was going to say Brunell, but okay, there you go.
Yep.
I'm glad my old brain isn't failing me yet, Mace. Not completely, anyway.
It's going to fail.
Do, though, man.
It's going to fail us all at some point. Give it time.
Yes, that's for sure. But get there how you get there, and make sure to surge right now. Don't, coast or take anything for granted. Again, I don't think this team will. But after this bye, come out swinging.
You'd feel a lot better if you could get this win against Indianapolis and then take 1 out of 2. Look, unless you're playing a couple of bad teams in consecutive games on the road, almost any road swing of 2 games, if you get 1 out of 2, you actually feel pretty good coming out of it. Like that's doing what you should do. So get this win, and then it's not, oh, well, we need to maybe get both games here. No, you then at that point, you get this win. If you can pick up another, you'll feel pretty good. But this is why you kind of regard this week as almost a playoff game, is because, as we mentioned with the Colts schedule, and we're talking about with the Broncos schedule. I mean, so after this game, again, the Chiefs might be resting their starters in Week 18, but after this game, the Broncos face teams that are, 8-5, 4-8. So that's 12 and 13 plus 12-1. So 24-14. And the Colts face teams that are 8-31.
Pretty big difference.
That's why you got to have this one. You can't, if you get a gift, the gift of a loss by the Colts in those last 3, certainly you'd be thrilled with it, but it's not something that you should rely on seeing under the Christmas tree, which means you got to get it done to where at that point you stop worrying about the Colts and you're able to focus on yourself.
Yes, and just take care of your business. Again, control what you can control. Now, Sean Payton talked earlier today. We'll do the penalties one in a little bit, but he did talk about a winning season, Mace. Let's set this one up.
Yeah, it was Chris Thomason, our good friend from the Denver Gazette, asking.
He's the number one guy, man.
Yeah, he came out and asked, like, if there was any. That was his theme. Like, I think he was trying to make the the quest for a winning season like means something today because he asked about it repeatedly. That's clearly his story. The Broncos, of course, have not had a winning season since 2016 when they went 9-7. But the idea of getting that 9th win and getting a winning season, let's just say Sean Payton really wasn't having it.
I don't know that one person downstairs, myself included, have thought about right now this team just having a winning season. I understand the question and I appreciate it, but I think our aspirations are a little higher.
He appreciates the question. He was nice about it. I appreciate the question.
Aspirations are a little higher.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
You know, it's interesting because I saw this. There's an old clip from like 1978. NFL Films did. It was like their Road to the Super Bowl thing. And they they would do like a highlight film for the entire league that they would run. Usually like back before Super Bowl pregame shows were 10 hours or whatever, they'd run a highlight film that summarized the season leading up to the Super Bowl back when it was only an hour and a half pregame show. And so there's a segment in the 1978 one. They focus on the Eagles getting a winning season, which was their first winning season in over a decade. Dick Vermeil was their head coach, and they show him on the sideline saying, "Eagles are winners, yeah," and hugging in the locker room. And nowhere in the film does it mention that the Eagles got to the playoffs, that they were a wild card team. They lost the next week to Atlanta. But I think that's interesting to show like how maybe back in those days when a winning season didn't necessarily mean a playoff season. I mean, usually it does, but not always. But the notion of a winning season without a playoff season still kind of meant something at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly it meant less the more wild cards you added. But thinking, I thought about that, and then when I heard Sean Payton having that response, and I think he's correct in this day and age. Being 9-8, I don't think that means crap. I really don't. Nor should it.
Well, I don't want to be hyperbolic, although I am emotional and opinionated. Ask me about how I got in trouble today on the air, Mace. Anyway, that's a different conversation.
Is that for off the air, or are we having it here?
I could tell it later, but like for me, isn't that a loser's mentality of like, oh, it's just good enough. Hey, we made it, guys. Like, and it tells me, again, not to get hyperbolic, Sean Payton's eyes are on the prize.
Mm-hmm.
That's a Super Bowl. That doesn't mean it's this year. But I'm not going to tell Sean Payton he's not going to win it this year. And deep down inside, he might think he can. Because that's what you have to do to get to that level. You have to believe you can. When nobody believes you can, you still have to believe you can.
Well, you came with it a blocked field goal of winning at Kansas City. By that measure, you're not far off. By the measure of the Baltimore game, you're ways off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But also, I mean, you just take a look around the league, take a look at the one-off results. Look at Cleveland beating Pittsburgh on Thursday Night Football.
The Raiders beat the Ravens.
Yes, in Baltimore. Stuff happens. I don't think a lot of people had the Rams winning yesterday.
No.
And the Rams are kind of where the Broncos are. That well-coached but decidedly incomplete puzzle of a playoff contender. The Rams are 7-6, Broncos 8-5, but they're still kind of very much in that same category. I'd throw Tampa Bay in there as well. Now mm-hmm. back in the lead in the NFC South, and there's an example of a team that you look at that roster and it's missing the defense is sometimes being held up with duct tape and baling wire without Chris Godwin. But they went in Detroit in week 2 and gave the Lions their only loss. They did beat the Eagles handily back right after losing to the Broncos, by the way. But for an overtime coin flip, might have won in Kansas City there on Monday Night Football. The reaction of Baker Mayfield when they lost the coin toss. is still to me kind of what defines the Buccaneer season to date. But oh yeah, that's a Buccaneer team that went in and took the Chiefs to overtime without Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So you look at those results, and these are the Broncos are basically in that class of like, they can be in the playoffs, but like I said, they're fringy playoff teams. But that doesn't mean you can't go and win some games getting in there. I still think winning 3 on the road is probably a bridge too far, but 1 game or 2 games, no. I mean, I'm going to go into Rogue One mode here. It's like you keep taking the next shot and the next chance and the next until victory is won or all the chances are spent. That's the joy of getting into playoffs. You just keep taking one swing or another until you're out.
Well,
but at least you get those swings.
Matthew Stafford and Bo Nix all lead teams that you don't want to see in the postseason if they play at their best. And our buddy James Marilat, who's a really nice guy, some of you out there on YouTube do not like him, but he said if the Broncos finish as the 5 seed and all the road teams win in the wild card round, then Denver would host a playoff game.
Yeah.
Because they'd face the 7.
I have to admit, I couldn't stop chuckling at that one.
Hey, at least he was positive today.
That is so far beyond my expectation. It's not something I consider. I sort of think of the playoffs and say, probably going to have to go on the road. You lose right now. You lose the tiebreaker to the Chargers, although you can get it back with a win a week from Thursday. Like if you stay right there with the Chargers, you can make that up and actually if you beat the Chargers and then you beat the Chiefs in week 18, that'll get the Broncos to 4-2, and then it goes to common opponents, which that's actually where the Indianapolis game wouldn't have a lot of meaning. So there's a path for the Broncos to pass the Chargers if they can win that game a week from Thursday, and then you have to clear the Ravens by a game, but it's not out of the realm of possibility, especially as the Ravens continue to have these mystifying losses like they did with Justin Tucker missing. Now, to just go through the Ravens' next 4 games, by the way, Cease, it's at the Giants, Pittsburgh at home, at Houston, Cleveland at home.
Okay.
So Pittsburgh, Houston, those are obviously tricky games. You expect they'll dispatch the Giants. You expect they'll dispatch the Browns. I think the other thing with the Ravens is maybe I'm getting the wrong read on them, but they sort of strike me as a team that is almost getting their problems out of the way now.
Working them out now.
I equate them to a baseball team that comes in under expectations but sneaks in as the last seed or the next to last seed in the playoffs and then goes on a run. It's definitely the vibe I get from the Ravens. I would not want to be a team hosting the Ravens in the wild card round. That's maybe I'm putting too much on that game that we saw in Baltimore. To me, that's still the best team I've seen this year when they're at their peak. That their A game's better than anybody's. But as with many teams, they can have a lot of C, D, and F games. I mean, the Buccaneers have a great A game, but the Broncos got them when they had a D- game, right? Sometimes it's as simple as that.
Yep. And the really, really great ones, this is a different conference, of course, but Detroit can have Jared Goff throw 5 picks and still win. So when you're really good, when you're excellent, you can have bad days. You can be on your D game and you can still find a way to win.
But doesn't that also say something about Houston and why Houston's I think we can all agree if you get in the playoffs, you want to see Houston, right? that's the matchup for pretty much anybody. There, and just kind of go through the last go through the last 5 games for Houston here before their bye. They lose at the Jets. Woof. They lose to the Lions. No shame in that, but Jared Goff has 5 picks. There is shame in losing to a team whose quarterback has 5 interceptions. They beat the Cowboys. Whoop-de-friggin-do, they stink. They lose at home to the Titans, and they squeak by the Jaguars. That 5-game sample size is not that of a team that is exceptional. That's another team that looks like they're on the fringe.
Yep.
And Miami at home in Houston next week. I wouldn't count on the Texans winning that game. And of course, there comes another thing because Miami did escape from the Jets' clutches on Sunday. Miami's run in here is at Houston, which, like we mentioned, not playing good football, even though they just had the bye. San Francisco at home, they got the win over the Bears on Sunday, but certainly that's a shorthanded team without Christian McCaffrey. And then the Dolphins close at Cleveland and at the Jets. So another reason why the Broncos need to keep winning, because the Dolphins are in position to put some dubs together. And, oh, by the way, if the Dolphins do get those dubs, they will win the tiebreaker. So all the reason in the world for the Broncos to keep their foot on the accelerator, because they are not out of the mess of teams battling for that number 7 spot just yet.
We're not yet to our bonus, Mace, but we are at 15,825.
Wait, so we had 7 subscribers since we talked about it in the meeting. Well, thank you. We appreciate you.
Yeah.
We appreciate all of you. So we are at 175 subscribers left. If you know, you know. And appreciate all of you riding with us, but just need that little more to push. Just like the Broncos need a little more to push this playoff bid over the goal line. We need a little more to get to 16,000 in that bonus, as we shamelessly say. We appreciate all of you who are subscribing, and those of you who are still watching this and haven't subscribed, we humbly ask that you join our list of subscribers and give Cecil and Mace a Merry Christmas.
Yeah, there you go. Because you make our day. This is really, boy, this is a pretty deep personal conversation. Like, this is really the oasis of the day. Like, this show, this fun, the smiles, the times, like, it's fun talking about the Broncos. And even when they're not good, it's still fun to talk about the Broncos, Mace. And it's fun to do the show with you. So we're very appreciative of our audience here on YouTube.
It's going to be fun to talk about Tyler Warning late January and February and March, too.
Just check it out. Just check it out. We're going to have some Ash and Gente versus Tyler Warren conversations.
Oh, the debate's going to be fun.
The debates are going to be fun because we're going to talk about Bo Nix's window. And what's his best window? When he's cheap.
It's opening. It's opening. The horizon, the window. It's like
morning air.
Yeah, it's like in the morning when you throw it open and it's, you know, the birds come chirp, you know. The birds come chirping and everything's happy. It's like a Disney movie. You know, like isn't there a scene in like Beauty and the Beast when Belle throws open the, you know, and all the animals come up or whatever, something like that.
Yeah.
I'll ask my daughter, she'd know. She's a Disney encyclopedia.
The mice in Cinderella scared me as a young child.
What?
Like, I did not like the mice in Cinderella.
Jacques and Gus?
That's right. Those guys scared me as a kid. So, you know, hey, it is what it is. I would watch The Secret of Nim, and I love those mice.
They were lab mice, right? Yeah.
Because
NIM was the National Institute of Mental Health.
Yep. Yeah. Secret of Nim's pretty dark, man.
It is. For a kid's movie, it's incredibly dark.
I think I was like 3rd grade or something.
So that was like early 80s, because like the early 80s like saw these dark kids movies, like Secret of Nim, The Dark Crystal. You remember that was, yeah. Loved that film, but incredibly dark and incredibly like scary, you know, for some little kids.
Yeah. They were on something in the 80s. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I have an idea what they were on. I think if you know the 80s, you know what they were on.
Yes. So we'll leave that one alone. But Mace, before we're out of here today, and what a jam-packed group of shows we got for you this week. Can't wait to get back out there. Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit. Before we're out of here, how can folks help us out on YouTube?
Like,
Comment,
share,
subscribe,
and hit that notification bell. Ding!
so that you
Never
miss a
a
vid.
vid.
That's right. He's Andrew Mason. You follow him on all the socials at Mace Denver, and I'm at Cecil Lammey saying OBT's BFD. Thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned, smile, and stay frosty.